Welcome to African Folktales by Tammy. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Also share this story to someone who might be interested. Let's get into the story. Veronica Fubara adjusted the hem of her blouse as she stared at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, and a lingering sadness she tried to hide behind a weak smile. Life at home in Atakiri had been suffocating lately. Michael, the man she had once seen as her soulmate, now treated her as if she were invisible. Every conversation with him ended in harsh words or a dismissive glance, leaving her wondering what she had done to deserve such treatment. "Maybe I'm just not enough," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. The shrill ring of her phone interrupted her thoughts. She saw Naomi Okoro's name flashing on the screen and sighed in relief. Naomi was her only source of comfort. Unlike Michael, who barely acknowledged her presence, Naomi was always there to listen, to offer advice, and to remind her of her worth, even when she felt worthless. Veronica picked up the phone. "Vero, how are you holding up today?" Naomi's warm, familiar voice filled the room. "Just the usual," Veronica replied, forcing a chuckle. "Michael didn't even say good morning today. He's been like this for months." "That man doesn't deserve you," Naomi said gently. "You give everything, and he treats you like a burden. I keep telling you, Veronica, you need to think about your future. You deserve happiness." Veronica sighed again. "I know, Naomi, but where will I go? I have no job, no savings. He controls everything. I'd be out on the streets." Naomi's voice softened. "You have me. I'll always be here for you. If you ever need anything at all, you know you can count on me." Veronica felt a surge of gratitude. If not for Naomi, she wasn't sure how she would have survived the constant emotional storms at home. Naomi was her best friend, her confidant. They had met years ago at a charity event in Atakiri, and their friendship had grown stronger with time. Naomi had always been the dependable one, the friend who would drop everything to come running when Veronica called. But Veronica had no idea that behind Naomi's comforting presence lay a dark ulterior motive. Michael Fubara had changed drastically over the past year. What had started as mild irritation towards Veronica gradually evolved into outright contempt. He rarely came home early anymore, and when he did, he found reasons to pick on her. He would sneer at the food she prepared, insult her intelligence, and accuse her of being lazy. "I work all day to keep this house running, and what do? Sit around and waste my money," he spat one evening when she asked for money to buy groceries. Veronica flinched but said nothing. She had learned that defending herself only made things worse. The verbal abuse left her emotionally drained, but she endured it, believing that maybe if she worked harder to please him, things would improve. Michael's disdain was not random. Naomi had been whispering poison into his ears for months. She played both sides flawlessly, pretending to care about Veronica's well-being while subtly manipulating Michael's perception of his wife. "Michael, I hate to say this, but Veronica doesn't seem to appreciate how much you do for her," Naomi would say during their secret meetings. "You've built a life for her, and yet she just expects more. Maybe she's too comfortable." Michael, already frustrated by a stagnating career and personal insecurities, latched onto Naomi's words. He began to see Veronica not as his partner but as a liability, a weight holding him back from the life he felt he deserved. Naomi fueled his resentment while maintaining her position as Veronica's closest friend. Meanwhile, Veronica leaned on Naomi more than ever. The days blurred into a routine of isolation and self-doubt. She no longer recognized the confident woman she had once been. Simple tasks like making breakfast or cleaning the house felt overwhelming under Michael's constant criticism. Each night she lay awake, replaying his words in her mind, wondering if she was truly the failure he claimed she was. Naomi, ever the loyal friend, continued to visit regularly. She would bring small gifts, bottles of wine, scented candles, and sit with Veronica for hours listening to her vent. Naomi's face was a mask of empathy as she gently nudged Veronica towards thoughts of separation. "You have to think about your happiness, Vero," Naomi would say, her voice soft and persuasive. "This isn't love. You can't keep sacrificing yourself for a man who doesn't see your worth." "But I have no options," Veronica would reply, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. "Options will come," Naomi assured her. "You just need to prepare yourself mentally. One day you'll have the strength to walk away." It was a delicate game of control. Naomi kept Veronica dependent on her advice while feeding Michael's desire to break free from his marriage. Both of them were oblivious to the fact that they were pawns in Naomi's larger scheme. As the weeks passed, Veronica found herself sinking deeper into despair. She longed for the days when she and Michael would laugh together, share dreams, and plan for the future. Those days seemed like distant memories now. All she had left was Naomi, her best friend and confidant. But sometimes even the most comforting shadows hide the sharpest knives. The house echoed with silence as Veronica Fubara busied herself in the kitchen, wiping down the counters for the third time that morning. The air was heavy, filled with an unspoken tension that had become a constant presence in the home. Michael had left early as usual without saying goodbye. His cold demeanor was something Veronica was growing used to, though it still stung each time he brushed past her without a word. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. "Maybe things will change," she whispered, though even she didn't believe her own words. Deep down she felt trapped, her life shrinking to the confines of the house. Later that afternoon, Naomi arrived, her perfume filling the air with a sweet, intoxicating scent. She strolled in confidently, her high heels clicking on the tiled floor as if she owned the place. Veronica smiled faintly, relieved to see her friend. "Vero, you've lost weight," Naomi observed as she placed a basket of fruit on the counter. "You're stressing too much. You shouldn't let Michael get to you." Veronica sighed, pulling out a chair at the dining table. "It's hard, Naomi. He's always angry at me. I can't seem to do anything right in his eyes. Even if I breathe too loudly, it's a problem." Naomi shook her head in sympathy, taking a seat across from her. "Men like Michael take things for granted. He doesn't appreciate what he has. And you've been too kind to him. That's why he's behaving like this." Veronica nodded slowly. Naomi's words felt validating, like the support she desperately needed. She didn't realize, however, that Naomi's comforting voice was part of a carefully laid trap. Naomi had been planting seeds of doubt for months, using each visit to chip away at Veronica's sense of security while reinforcing Michael's growing frustration behind the scenes. At the same time, Michael's resentment festered, fueled by Naomi's subtle suggestions. She would visit his office in Adumiri under the guise of casual friendship, but their conversations were anything but innocent. "Michael, have you noticed how much happier you are when you're not at home?" Naomi asked one day, handing him a file she pretended was urgent. She leaned casually against his desk, her tone light but calculated. Michael frowned, leaning back in his chair. "I've been stressed lately, that's all. Work and other things." "Other things," Naomi repeated with a knowing smile. "You mean Veronica? I hate to say it, but maybe she's become too dependent on you. You've worked hard for this life, and instead of being your partner, she's dragging you down with her constant needs." Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't like hearing it, but Naomi's words echoed thoughts he'd had during his sleepless nights. He had sacrificed so much to build a stable life, and yet Veronica acted as though her only role was to exist in the background, waiting for him to provide everything. The growing bitterness in his chest needed an outlet, and Naomi knew exactly how to direct it. "Sometimes I wonder if things would be easier if—" Michael's voice trailed off, but Naomi caught the implication. "You don't have to wonder, Michael," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You deserve peace. And if that means making some hard decisions, then so be it. Life is too short to be miserable." At home, Veronica continued to bear the brunt of Michael's increasing hostility. The verbal attacks became more frequent and unpredictable. One evening, as she set the table for dinner, Michael stormed into the dining room, his face twisted with irritation. "Is this all you made?" he demanded, glaring at the plate of rice and vegetables. "I've been working all day, and this is what I come home to." Veronica's heart sank. I thought you liked this dish." "Don't think," he snapped. "You clearly don't understand what it means to take care of a husband." Maybe if you weren't so useless, we wouldn't be in this mess. She bit her lip, swallowing the urge to argue. It wasn't about the food. It never was. Michael seemed determined to find fault in everything she did. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Crying would only make things worse. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Veronica's mind wandered to Naomi's advice. "You deserve happiness." The words echoed in her mind like a distant dream. But how could she pursue happiness when she had no money, no career, and no support outside of Naomi? The irony was cruel. Naomi, the only person she trusted, was also the orchestrator of her suffering. By manipulating both sides, Naomi ensured that neither Veronica nor Michael saw the full picture. Veronica continued to confide in Naomi, seeking solace in her friend's reassuring presence, while Michael grew more dependent on Naomi's influence to justify his actions. Each day, the divide between husband and wife widened. Naomi played the role of the perfect friend, all while steering both of them toward a breaking point. She had her own vision of the future, a life where Veronica was out of the picture and Michael was hers to control. But for now, the seeds of manipulation were thriving in silence, and Veronica had no idea just how deep the betrayal ran. Veronica sat on the edge of the couch in the living room, absently folding and refolding the same piece of cloth in her hands. The television was on, but the images flashed before her eyes without meaning. She wasn't watching, just drowning in the noise it provided. It helped mask the sound of her thoughts that become increasingly dark and unsettling. Michael hadn't come home until late the previous night. When he did, he reeked of alcohol and barely acknowledged her presence. This wasn't the first time. His long absences had become the norm, and when he was around, all he did was criticize her. She often wondered how their relationship had deteriorated so quickly. They had been in love once deeply, but now she felt more like a tenant in her own home, walking on eggshells to avoid confrontation. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table, snapping her out of her trance. It was Naomi calling as usual to check on her. Veronica grabbed the phone, her voice cracking slightly as she answered. "Vero, it's me. Are you okay?" Naomi's voice was gentle, soothing. "I guess," Veronica muttered. "Michael was out again last night. He barely spoke to me when he got home. I tried talking to him this morning, but he just looked at me like I was a stranger." Naomi sighed, her tone laced with sympathy. "I don't know how you've endured this for so long. You're stronger than I would ever be in your situation." Veronica swallowed hard, guilt creeping into her chest. She didn't feel strong. In fact, she felt weak and powerless. Yet Naomi's words always seemed to give her a sliver of validation, a reminder that someone cared, even if Michael didn't. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm the problem," Veronica admitted. "Maybe I'm not doing enough to keep him happy. I try, but nothing seems to work." "Don't even think that," Naomi interrupted firmly. "This isn't your fault. A man who truly loves his wife doesn't treat her like that. You've been doing everything you can. If anyone's failing, it's him." Veronica nodded silently, allowing the words to sink in. Naomi was right. She had sacrificed so much for this marriage, her dreams, her independence, her happiness. And what did she have to show for it? A husband who barely tolerated her presence, and a house that felt more like a prison with each passing day. "I'm sorry, Naomi," Veronica whispered. "I don't mean to burden you with my problems." "You're not a burden," Naomi said softly. "That's what friends are for. Besides, you'd do the same for me if the roles were reversed, wouldn't you?" "Of course," Veronica replied without hesitation. Naomi had always been there for her ever since they first met at that charity event in Atakiri. Their friendship had been a source of comfort and stability, especially in recent months. Veronica couldn't imagine navigating this nightmare without her. But what Veronica didn't realize was that Naomi's support came with a hidden agenda. Every time she offered advice or comfort, she subtly planted seeds of doubt and fear. Naomi wanted Veronica to feel isolated and dependent, unable to see a future without her. She also wanted Michael to grow increasingly resentful, using every opportunity to fan the flames of his discontent. Michael, on the other hand, was spiraling deeper into anger and frustration. He felt trapped in a marriage that offered him no joy, no excitement. Naomi's words echoed in his mind constantly, reminders that he deserved more, that he had worked too hard to settle for mediocrity. At work, Naomi continued to feed his bitterness, disguised as concern. "Michael, you look exhausted," she remarked during a lunch break. "You can't keep living like this. It's affecting your health and your mood. Don't you want peace in your life?" "Of course I do," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "But it's not that simple. There's a lot at stake." "I know," Naomi said softly, leaning forward slightly. "But sometimes you have to put yourself first. You can't keep sacrificing your happiness for someone who doesn't appreciate you. You've done enough." Michael exhaled deeply, his mind racing. He hated coming home to the same arguments, the same tension. Naomi had become a source of relief, a person who understood him without judgment. "I just need time to figure things out," he finally said. "Take all the time you need," Naomi replied, flashing a supportive smile. "I'll always be here for you." Back at the house, Veronica stared at the photo frame on the mantelpiece. It was a picture from their honeymoon in Mabori Hills. They had been so happy back then, laughing, holding hands, dreaming of a future filled with love and success. She barely recognized those two people now. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Naomi entered with her usual grace, carrying a bag of pastries. "I thought you might need some company," Naomi said, placing the bag on the table. Veronica's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Naomi embraced her, a satisfied smirk hidden behind her concerned expression. "You'll never have to find out, Vero. I'll always be here for you." Veronica didn't see the calculating glint in Naomi's eyes. For now, she was just grateful to have someone to lean on, a shoulder to cry on in a world that seemed intent on breaking her. Veronica wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and stared at the window. Outside, the sun bathed the garden in golden light, a deceptive contrast to the storm brewing in her life. The tension between her and Michael was growing worse by the day. He no longer spoke to her unless it was to criticize or demand something. It had become a routine. Veronica would tiptoe around him, trying to avoid his outbursts, but somehow she always ended up on the receiving end of his wrath. That evening she prepared his favorite meal, spicy jollof rice with grilled chicken and fried plantains, hoping it might improve his mood. When he arrived, his face was as hard as stone. He barely glanced at her as he sat at the dining table. Veronica nervously served him, placing the steaming plate in front of him. "What's this?" he asked flatly, his eyes narrowing as he inspected the food. "It's jollof rice, your favorite," she said quietly. Michael shook his head and scoffed. "You think I don't get tired of eating the same thing all the time? For someone who stays at home all day, you could at least try something different." "But no, that would require effort." Veronica froze, her hands trembling slightly. The words stung, but she kept her expression neutral. She had grown used to swallowing her pride. Arguing would only escalate things. Instead, she mumbled an apology and turned away, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Michael continued eating in silence, his mind elsewhere. He wasn't truly angry about the food. The truth was, he felt trapped in a marriage he no longer wanted. Naomi's constant suggestions played in his mind like a drumbeat, fueling his dissatisfaction. He wanted out, but didn't know how to go about it without facing backlash from his family. Divorce carried a heavy stigma in their community, and he wasn't ready for the judgment it would bring. Later that night, as Veronica lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how things had come to this. The man beside her, who once whispered sweet promises and dreams of a bright future, now barely acknowledged her existence. She tried to remember the last time they had laughed together, but the memory felt too distant to grasp. The next morning, Naomi paid another visit. She arrived early, bringing a box of pastries and a bright smile. Veronica greeted her at the door, grateful for the company. "How was last night?" Naomi asked as they settled in the living room. "The same," Veronica said with a sigh. Michael complained about dinner again. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I try to make things right, but it's like he's looking for reasons to hate me." Naomi shook her head in disapproval. "You're not doing anything wrong, Vero. He's the one who's changed. You can't keep blaming yourself for his behavior. Sometimes people just grow apart." Veronica leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. "I don't want to give up Naomi. I still love him despite everything. But it's getting harder to hold on. You've already done more than most women would, Naomi said, her tone gentle but firm. You've given this marriage everything, but what has he given you in return? Nothing but pain. Veronica nodded silently. Naomi's words always carried weight, like a voice of reason cutting through the fog of confusion in her mind. It was comforting, yet it also left her feeling more uncertain about her future. Naomi, however, was not uncertain at all. She knew exactly what she wanted and how to achieve it. The cracks in Michael and Veronica's marriage were widening, and Naomi was there to ensure they shattered completely. She played both sides masterfully, encouraging Michael to think of divorce while pushing Veronica toward emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, Michael was becoming increasingly agitated. During lunch at work, he met with Naomi in a secluded corner of the office cafeteria. I don't know how much more of this I can take, he said, rubbing his temples. Being at home feels like torture. I just want peace. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes filled with sympathy. You deserve peace, Michael, and you won't find it by staying in a situation that's draining you. You've done your part. Maybe it's time to start thinking about what's best for you. Michael sighed deeply. He had thought about it many times. Divorce was beginning to seem like the only option, but it also terrified him. It's not that simple, Naomi, people will talk. My family, they'll never let me hear the end of it. You can't live your life for other people, Naomi said softly. You've given this marriage enough chances. If your happiness matters to you, you need to start making decisions that reflect that. Michael nodded slowly, the words sinking in. He trusted Naomi more than anyone else at this point. She was the only one who seemed to understand the weight he carried. As the days passed, Veronica found herself slipping further into despair. Michael's behavior showed no signs of improving, and Naomi's visits, while comforting, only reminded her of how isolated she truly was. She was stuck between two versions of herself, the hopeful woman who once believed in love and the broken woman now clinging to survival. But deep beneath the surface, something was shifting. The cracks in her world were deepening, and though she didn't realize it yet, a moment of revelation was drawing closer, one that would force her to confront the lies that had been woven around her. For now, however, she simply endured, unaware of the full extent of the betrayal closing in on her. Veronica felt numb as the days passed. The coldness in her home was unbearable, and the weight of Michael's constant criticism crushed her spirit. Naomi's visits were becoming less frequent lately, though her calls came regularly. Naomi had told her she was busy with work, but Veronica couldn't shake a sense of growing distance from her friend. Still, she didn't dwell on it too much. Her focus was on finding ways to keep her marriage from crumbling, even though every effort seemed futile. One afternoon, Michael came home earlier than expected. Veronica heard his footsteps enter the house and tried to greet him with a smile. You're home early. Is everything okay? Michael barely glanced at her. I have a meeting later. I'm just stopping by to get some things. His voice was curt, devoid of warmth. He didn't wait for a response as he strode upstairs to their bedroom. Veronica's stomach twisted with anxiety. This was her life now, walking on eggshells, bracing for what a storm might come next. She busied herself with chores, hoping he wouldn't be around long enough to criticize her for something. A short while later, she heard his voice, low and serious. He was on the phone. Veronica paused, straining to catch the conversation as she stood near the staircase. Yeah, I'll meet you at the usual place, Michael said in a hushed tone. We need to finalize everything soon. I'm done waiting. There was a brief pause, followed by a chuckle that sent a chill down Veronica's spine. She hadn't heard Michael laugh in months. I told you I'll take care of it. Stop worrying. She's too clueless to notice anything, he continued. Clueless. Veronica's heartbeat quickened. Was he talking about her? I'll text you when I leave here. Just be ready, Michael added before ending the call. Veronica gripped the banister, her thoughts racing. Who had he been speaking to, and what did he mean by finalize everything? She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her instincts told her that something was deeply wrong. Later that evening, she decided to do something she'd never done before. As Michael prepared to leave the house, Veronica quietly followed him, slipping out after he drove away. She didn't know where he was going, but she had a sinking feeling it was somewhere she needed to see for herself. Michael's car led her to Gardenia Suites, a quiet upscale hotel on the outskirts of Atakiri. Veronica parked at a distance and watched as he entered the building. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. What was he doing here? Was he meeting someone? For a moment, she debated turning around and leaving. Maybe she didn't want to know the truth. But another part of her, the part that had endured months of pain and betrayal, demanded answers. She took a deep breath and followed him inside, keeping her head low as she moved through the lobby. She didn't have to wait long. From behind a pillar, she saw Michael step into the lounge area. Naomi was already there, dressed elegantly and seated at a table near the window. When Michael approached, she smiled warmly and stood to greet him with a hug that lasted too long. Veronica's chest tightened as she watched them. They spoke in low voices, but their body language spoke volumes. Naomi touched Michael's arm as they laughed softly, their faces closer than what friends should ever allow. It was clear, painfully clear, that this was not an innocent meeting. Veronica clenched her fists, anger and heartbreak crashing over her in waves. She felt like screaming, but she knew she couldn't reveal herself yet. She needed to hear them, to confirm everything before confronting them. Moving carefully, she found a spot closer to their table, just out of sight. Their voices became clearer as she strained to listen. "We have to be smart about this," Naomi was saying. "If you rush it, she might try to fight back." "She won't," Michael replied confidently. "Veronica's too dependent on me. She has no money, no job. She'll have no choice but to leave quietly." Naomi nodded. "Good. The sooner she's out of the picture, the better. We can finally stop sneaking around." Veronica's vision blurred with tears. Each word pierced her heart like a dagger. They had been planning this for who knows how long, planning to discard her like she was nothing. Naomi, the woman she had trusted above all others, was not only having an affair with her husband, but was also actively plotting her downfall. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stay rooted in place. She listened as they discussed logistics, how Michael would file for divorce, how they would ensure Veronica got nothing in the settlement. Naomi even suggested ways to paint Veronica as unstable if necessary. The betrayal was deeper than she could have ever imagined. Finally, Veronica could take no more. She stumbled out of the building, gasping for air as if the walls were closing in around her. She sat in her car, shaking with fury and heartbreak. For a moment, she allowed herself to cry, to release the overwhelming pain suffocating her. But then something shifted inside her. The tears stopped, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. They thought she was weak, that she would crumble under the weight of their betrayal. But they were wrong. Veronica would not be broken. If they wanted to destroy her, she would make sure they regretted it. She wiped her face, started the car, and drove home. The storm that had been brewing for months was about to erupt, and this time she would be the one holding the power. Veronica sat in the dimly lit corner of her bedroom, her mind racing as she tried to piece together a plan. The betrayal was no longer a question. It was a reality that stabbed at her every waking moment. Naomi and Michael thought they'd outsmarted her, that she was too broken and dependent to fight back. But they underestimated her. This time she wouldn't cry and cower. She would strike at the heart of their lies. The first step was to gather evidence. It wasn't enough to expose the affair. She needed solid proof to back her claims, especially with Michael's intention to leave her with nothing. Veronica grabbed her phone and scrolled through messages from Naomi, searching for clues she may have overlooked in the past. There were countless friendly exchanges, invitations for lunch, and messages filled with concern. Yet now those words felt tainted, their true purpose hidden beneath Naomi's mask of kindness. Her hand hovered over a recent message. "You deserve better than this, Vero. You're too good for someone who doesn't see your worth." Veronica almost laughed bitterly. The same woman who sent that message was plotting her destruction. She took a deep breath and started saving screenshots. Every conversation with Naomi and Michael would become part of her arsenal. Next, she needed witnesses. She couldn't rely solely on her word. Their families had to see the truth for themselves. She decided to call her elder sister, Gloria, who lived in Adagiri. Gloria had always been protective of her, though they hadn't spoken much in recent months. Veronica hated the idea of airing her private struggles, but this was bigger than her pride. "Vero, you're calling at this hour? Is everything okay?" Gloria's concerned voice came through the line. "I need to talk to you," Veronica said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's complicated. Can you come over tomorrow? I really need you." Gloria didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'll be there in the morning. Don't worry, Vero. We'll sort this out." Veronica hung up, feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. Having Gloria's support would give her strength, but there was still more to do. She knew that Michael's family would be harder to convince. His mother, Mama Fubara, was fiercely loyal to her son and rarely believed anything negative about him. However, Veronica had always shared a cordial relationship with Michael's elder brother, Emmanuel. He was level-headed and respected fairness. If she could get him to listen, perhaps he could influence the rest of the family. The following day, Veronica went about her usual routine with calculated calm. Michael was already out of the house, as expected. He had left early without a word, likely meeting Naomi again. Veronica seized the opportunity to make a few more phone calls. She arranged a meeting with Emmanuel later in the week, carefully wording her request to avoid raising suspicion. By mid-morning, Gloria arrived, her face etched with worry. She hugged Veronica tightly as soon as she walked through the door. "What's going on, Vero? You sounded so shaken last night." Veronica led her to the living room and hesitated for a moment, unsure how to begin. Finally, she said, "Michael is cheating on me with Naomi." Gloria's eyes widened in shock. "Naomi? Your best friend, Naomi?" "No, that can't be true." "It is," Veronica whispered. "I followed them. I heard them talking about how they're planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. Naomi's been manipulating me for months, pretending to care while helping Michael destroy our marriage." Gloria sat back, her expression hardening. "That's disgusting. How long has this been going on?" "I don't know," Veronica admitted, "but I need to expose them before they can carry out their plan. I've already started collecting evidence, but I need your help. Michael's family will defend him unless I show them the truth." "Say no more," Gloria said firmly. "You have my full support. We'll make sure they can't deny what they've done." Together, they spent the next few hours reviewing Veronica's evidence. Gloria suggested additional steps, including discreetly recording future conversations. "People like Michael and Naomi will try to gaslight you," she warned. "We need to be ready for that." Over the following days, Veronica played her role perfectly. She maintained a facade of submission, allowing Michael to believe she was still in the dark. Naomi visited once, but Veronica kept their interaction brief, feigning exhaustion. The sight of her former friend made Veronica's blood boil, but she forced herself to remain composed. Meanwhile, she enlisted Emmanuel's help, arranging a meeting with several key family members under the guise of a dinner gathering. It would be the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth. Emmanuel was skeptical at first, but agreed to listen when she hinted that the situation involved both betrayal and deception within the family. As the pieces fell into place, Veronica felt a growing sense of empowerment. She was no longer the passive, helpless woman who cowered under Michael's abuse. Each step she took brought her closer to reclaiming control of her life. The storm was building, and when it finally broke, Michael and Naomi would face the consequences of their actions. But for now, she waited quietly, patiently, knowing that her moment of reckoning was near. The evening air was thick with anticipation as family members arrived at Veronica and Michael's house for the gathering. Veronica had chosen this night carefully, ensuring everyone she needed to witness the confrontation would be present. Emmanuel, Mama Fubara, and other relatives from both sides filled the living room, exchanging pleasantries and small talk. Naomi arrived with a confident smile, unaware of the storm brewing beneath Veronica's composed exterior. Veronica moved through the room gracefully, greeting everyone and offering refreshments. She looked calm, but inside her heart raced. Everything had to go perfectly. She couldn't afford to falter. Gloria stood nearby, a silent source of strength and support. They exchanged a brief glance, and Gloria gave her a reassuring nod. Michael arrived shortly after, his usual stern expression softening slightly at the sight of the gathering. He seemed oblivious to what was about to unfold. Naomi approached him almost immediately, placing a hand on his arm in a gesture that might have appeared innocent to others. Veronica caught the movement and felt a surge of anger, but she remained focused. Once everyone was seated, Veronica stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I've been meaning to have this family gathering for a while now," she began, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of strength. "However, before we continue with dinner, there's something important I need to share." The room grew quiet and all eyes turned to her. Naomi shifted slightly in her seat, her smile faltering for a moment. Michael frowned in confusion, sensing the seriousness in Veronica's tone. "I've been going through some difficult times," Veronica continued, her voice steady, "and for a long time I thought I was the only one struggling. But recently I discovered something that changed everything." She reached for her phone and played an audio recording. It was from one of Michael and Naomi's private conversations, the one where they had discussed finalizing the divorce plan. The room was filled with their voices, clear and undeniable. Naomi froze, her face paling as the damning words echoed through the room. Michael's eyes widened in shock. The murmurs from the family grew louder, a mixture of disbelief and outrage filling the air. "What is this nonsense?" Michael demanded, his voice sharp. Veronica met his gaze without flinching. "It's the truth. You and Naomi have been plotting behind my back for months. You planned to discard me like I was nothing. But now everyone knows what you've been doing." Emmanuel stood, his expression hard. "Michael, is this true? You've been having an affair with Naomi?" Michael stammered, unable to form a coherent response. Naomi tried to regain her composure, shaking her head. "This is a misunderstanding. Veronica, you're overreacting. Don't lie." Veronica cut in, her voice rising for the first time. "You've been pretending to be my friend, comforting me while you stabbed me in the back. I trusted you, Naomi. I let you into my life and you betrayed me in the worst way possible. You're really the wolf in sheep's clothing." The room erupted into chaos. Mama Fubara gasped, clutching her chest in shock. "Michael, how could you do this? To your wife, to your family?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Michael muttered, his voice weak. He looked around the room, seeing the disappointment and anger in every face. The confidence he had always exuded was gone, replaced by shame and fear. Naomi, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to defend herself. "Michael and we were just talking. Things have been difficult for him. I was only trying to help." "Help?" Veronica repeated bitterly. "You call this help? You've destroyed any trust I had in you. And Michael, you let her manipulate you into turning against me." Gloria stepped forward then, her voice firm. "You both deserve whatever consequences come your way. Veronica has been through enough. It's time for her to get justice." The weight of the evidence was too much to deny. Relatives who had been skeptical of Veronica's claims now saw the truth laid bare. Michael's betrayal wasn't just a personal matter. It was a stain on the family's reputation. Mama Fubara shook her head in dismay, refusing to look at her son. "Veronica," Emmanuel said gently, "we are all ashamed of what's happened. You didn't deserve this. If there's anything we can do to make things right, you have my support." Veronica nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Thank you. I'm not going to let this destroy me. I've already spoken to my lawyer. There will be consequences for what they've done, legally and otherwise." Michael and Naomi sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation sank in. The people they had counted on to protect and defend them were now turning their backs. The control they thought they had was slipping away with every passing moment. Veronica turned to face Naomi one last time. "You thought I was weak. You thought I would crumble under the weight of your betrayal. But you were wrong. I'm done being a victim." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving Michael and Naomi to face the full weight of their disgrace. The air was thick with tension and whispered condemnation. Veronica had reclaimed her power, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. Veronica stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline of her crisp white blouse. The woman staring back at her looked different, stronger, more confident. The fear and self-doubt that had haunted her for so long were gone. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose. Her lawyer had finalized the divorce settlement a week ago. Despite Michael's attempts to delay the proceedings, the evidence Veronica had gathered was irrefutable. Not only had she secured a fair share of their assets, but she had also made sure to protect herself from further manipulation. The court proceedings had been tense, with Michael trying to salvage his reputation, but every lie he told crumbled under the weight of the truth. Veronica sighed softly, thinking back to the moment the judge had ruled in her favor. The relief that had washed over her was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the financial security. It was the validation that she had done the right thing by standing up for herself. Gloria's voice called from downstairs, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Vero, are you ready? We need to leave soon." "Coming!" Veronica called back, grabbing her purse and heading toward the stairs. Gloria had been her pillar of support throughout the ordeal. She had stayed by Veronica's side, attending every meeting with the lawyer and helping her navigate the complex emotions that came with betrayal. Together, they had rebuilt a sense of sisterhood that had been missing for years. As Veronica and Gloria drove through the streets of Adakiri, Veronica reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The whispers and gossip surrounding her failed marriage had died down. People who once pitied her now admired her resilience. She had transformed from a victim into a symbol of strength, though she wasn't concerned about public perception. What mattered most was that she had reclaimed her dignity. Later that afternoon, Veronica met with a career counselor at a community center. It was part of her plan to rebuild her life on her own terms. For years, she had been dependent on Michael for financial stability. Now she was determined to stand on her own 2 feet. She had always dreamed of starting a business, something creative, something that would allow her to express herself. The counselor, a woman named Chidinma, smiled warmly as they discussed Veronica's goals. "You have a lot of potential, Veronica. With your experience managing a household, you already have strong organizational and budgeting skills. We can work on refining those and exploring business opportunities that match your interests." Veronica felt a spark of excitement. For so long she had been trapped in a cycle of despair, unable to envision a future beyond her pain. Now doors were opening before her, and she was ready to step through them. Meanwhile, Michael's life had unraveled in ways he hadn't anticipated. His family, particularly Mama Fubara and Emmanuel, had distanced themselves from him. The shame of his actions hung over him like a dark cloud. His once close network of friends and associates had grown wary, and whispers of his betrayal followed him everywhere he went. Naomi, too, found herself ostracized. Her reputation had been destroyed, and she quickly learned that trust was not easily repaired. The support system she had taken for granted vanished overnight, leaving her isolated and bitter. She reached out to Michael several times, but he ignored her calls. Without the secrecy of their affair, the thrill between them had faded, replaced by resentment and regret. Veronica, however, refused to dwell on their misfortune. She had wasted enough energy on their deceit. Now she focused on healing and building a future she could be proud of. One evening, Veronica sat on the balcony of her new apartment, sipping a cup of tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. The view of the city was breathtaking, a reminder of the beauty that still existed in the world despite the pain she had endured. Gloria joined her, carrying a plate of freshly baked pastries. "You've come a long way, sis," Gloria said, handing her a pastry. "I'm so proud of you," Veronica smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it without you. Don't sell yourself short. You found your strength when it mattered most. That's all you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Veronica thought about the future, her plans to start a business, the courses she had enrolled in, and the newfound peace that filled her heart. She had learned that healing was a process, not a destination. There would still be difficult days ahead, but she was ready for them. For the first time in years, she felt free. Free from the chains of betrayal, free from the weight of other people's expectations, and free to live life on her own terms. And that freedom was the greatest victory of all. As the evening deepened, Veronica leaned back in her chair and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you."